On this edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling, we'll talk about the passing of Shad Gaspard in a tragedy earlier this week. We'll also talk about Monday Night Raw, some of the biggest takeaways, including the billing of the greatest wrestling match of all time. We'll talk about AEW and NXT as well on this edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. Hey there, back in the saddle, Sean Meyers, as we bring you another week's edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. And joining me, a returning co-host, one Sean Saputo, by way of Texas. Sean, thank you for doing this. And I mentioned before we came on, it's sort of an abbreviated week for us because when I was last doing this show with Justin Lowry, it was wrapping up a week of Raw, SmackDown, and the Wednesday Night Wars. This week we're doing it before SmackDown, so we only have Monday and Wednesday in terms of the programming, but I think there's still a lot to get to. And we'll get into Raw, we'll get into NXT and AEW, but unfortunately, we have to start on something that is really not related to weekly programming of wrestling. A tragedy that I think not only has made headlines in the wrestling industry, but I believe it's pretty much a news story at this point. That is Shad Gaspard, formerly of Crime Time of the WWE, passed away, and the circumstances, and Shad is the taller one on the left in this photo, just awful, gut-wrenching to hear how it played out. He was at a beach with his son, maybe around 10 years old or so, his son, and I guess the tide, the current got pretty significant, and they were trying to get people out of the water. Well, it appears as though Shad was in some peril along with his son, but sort of made the rescuers go towards his son first. When they came back for him, he was gone. They had a search that lasted, I think, close to 2 days, and unfortunately it turned out that he was killed. This is really sad, and it's brought to the forefront a lot of the great things that he's been doing during and especially since his WWE career outside of the character, which I think was a fairly memorable one with Crime Time. What's your reaction to all the news that this has generated?
It was an element of surprise when when you're just kind of perusing through Twitter and you see somebody that, in my instance, you grew up watching with that tag team of Crime Time with him and JTG. It's kind of the element of surprise because it's not something you hear about often in everyday, occurrences. And really it shined a light, though, the more I read about it. And your thoughts and prayers are with Shad Gaspard's family right now and dealing with this loss. But, over that time, I mean, you've had these instances where people have gotten taken away by riptides and have luckily come out, alive of these situations. But after the 2 days and then the cancellation of the search, and then, he finally, washes up and it's pronounced him. I think during the entire thing, you learned a lot about Shad Gaspard as the person,
right?
As the wrestler. A lot of us, view him as the character he was back in Crime Time, and you don't really see a lot of the outside especially from around that time, because kayfabe was so limited back then. You really, viewed them as the character they are. And when you read a lot about what his motives were in life and, how passionate he was of being a father, I think in his final act, in his final minutes, showed true heroism in the way that he said, "Save my son," and
which they did. His son is okay,
and it just shows just how much of a hero he was and how passionate he was as a father. And it's an all-around tragic story, and that's the only way you can put this. And just another loss in the wrestling world that you're not sitting there thinking that it's going to happen to someone like this at any time soon. Right. So, and just, thoughts and prayers out to Shad Gaspard's family and loved ones. It's, it was gut wrenching news when you went on Twitter and saw what was going on.
And there's no easy way to put this, but when you look at the history of professional wrestling, you think back to the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, it was almost commonplace for wrestlers to die. Maybe not at age 39, but it almost something you just became, oh, okay, you're going to get 2 or 3 wrestlers every year that are well known that die. And it seems like that has tailed off for the people that are kind of in their younger years. Now you have some wrestlers passing away, but they're a little bit older in life, 60s, 70s. It seems like for the most part, this is not as common as before. And again, this was sort of just a freak occurrence that, there was no nothing that led up to it, as you alluded to. It's just completely out of nowhere and shocking. But that does seem to be one positive direction in the wrestling industry, is that when you watch these dark side of the rings and you hear all about these guys with their destructive lifestyles, that really isn't the case for the most part anymore.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, back then a lot of guys, late 30s to mid 50s was, you kind of got accustomed to it. But since then, you're, especially the circumstance that happened, it's not, what you're expecting to hear when you open up Twitter and see somebody like myself and some, friends of mine who grew up as kids watching these guys. You just don't expect to see it.
And it certainly affected a lot of people, current wrestlers in WWE, because while Shad had been gone for about a decade from the company, thereabouts, there's still a lot of guys that he wrestled with that are still there now. And I know Kofi Kingston was constantly, putting stuff out on Twitter and how much this meant to him. But we'll go through some of the guys just talking about the shows this week, and you say, yeah, they were there and they probably worked with him, or at least were co-workers with him back about 10 years ago. So it's not like someone from the 70s or 80s where no one in the business today really had much of a relationship. This certainly hit home with a lot of the competitors, it seems like.
It did, and one of the more touching videos that I noticed was back from WrestleMania last year, WrestleMania 35. It was a video of Shad and MVP together watching WrestleMania. Looked like they were at like a bar or a friend's house, something like that. And just their excitement and their, the tears that started to shed from them, and their excitement for Kofi, somebody that both of them worked with, that they got to witness the first African American WWE champion, and just how excited and happy they were for Kofi just showed, the true genuinism of Shad Gaspard as not only, who took his character very serious and did extremely well with it, but just, how you see the relationships that grow nowadays because of videos like that get to surface.
Absolutely. And we said he was with the company about a decade ago. 2 guys who have been with the company for a few decades as we transition into Raw have been Edge and Randy Orton. Edge obviously coming back after about a decade off at WrestleMania. He had a match with Orton that was polarizing. Some people hated it. Some people said it was pretty darn good. I think we even talked about it a little bit after WrestleMania. But to me, it was great to see Edge back, and I thought that while it dragged out a little bit, it was solid, but they wanted to run it back. And I think a lot of that came from maybe the negative reaction. These guys are so proud that they know, okay, we want to go out and have a match that's pretty much universally acclaimed. And they're presenting this now as a straight wrestling match, which is the complete opposite of how these things normally go. You normally start with traditional wrestling and then build up to a brutal match. It's tough for Orton to kind of sell this, but I think he did his best with the promos, explaining why he wants just a regular wrestling match. But now they're billing this as like this classic competition, and they have the tagline that this could be the greatest wrestling match ever. That seems almost comical because, one, while these guys are very, very good and 2 of the best in this company, there's some issues here. Edge is wrestling in his second match really in the past 10 years. Randy Orton is very good, but his style doesn't really appeal to a lot of the wrestling fans now. So, like, these guys are good, very, very good. I don't know that right now they're capable of delivering the greatest wrestling match, but even if they were, putting that type of tagline before it happens is insane and just puts unnecessary pressure on these guys that they're clearly not going to be able to live up to.
First of all, whoever came up with this tagline needs fired. That's first and foremost.
Charlie Caruso said it at the end of Raw last week, and I was like, I hope that's it, and it was not it.
Whoever wrote that line for Charlie Caruso should have been fired before he or she walked out that building. And if it was just Charlie Caruso spitballing something that they stuck with, she should be fired.
I guarantee she wouldn't be that dumb to say.
For them to use this tag as the greatest wrestling match ever is, in my opinion, a slap in the face to Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, a slap in the face again to Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin, a slap in the face to The Undertaker and again Shawn Michaels, Undertaker and Triple H. This match will not even go down as a top 500 match in WWE history.
And right now, it's impossible to have, I think, what would be considered a transcending match. I thought Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins had a banger, but like it just didn't feel the same as great matches previously because there's no fans there. It doesn't have the environment. It's like no one's really watching. There's no way, even if these guys deliver in the ring, that it will be fitting of what they've hyped it to be, which I don't remember them. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember them before a match saying repeatedly, this is going to be the best match ever. Like, it's just insane to me.
Yeah. Does it have the capability of being a good match? Yes, it does. But again, and you mentioned it, this is only going to be Edge's second match. The first match was pre-taped. Right. Things that didn't go right were redone, were resurfaced, were fixed. There's no fixing this match.
Well, let's be honest. They could tape this as well, but it's a little bit harder when it's just a straight wrestling match to do that.
So, again, you're stuck in a bind here because really this is Edge's first true match if it's going to be done live. So, he had the opportunity to work in a situation where things could be edited and things could be fixed. And now you don't have that. So does Edge really have everything that everybody wants to see? Now, he looked good at the Rumble for his, couple minute spurts, and then he'd get his lull, and then he came back and looked good. But can Edge put on a 20 to 25 minute match without, numerous hiccups throughout?
Let's be honest. These guys have had matches before when they were both in their prime, and I'm sure some of those matches were very good, maybe even great. But you wouldn't think of any of those and say, like, that's a top match in the history of this company. So if they didn't do it in their prime when they were wrestling regularly in front of fans, why would this be any different?
No, I mean, and, Randy Orton's never, he's one of the greats. Don't
I
get
think
me wrong.
He's underrated, honestly.
I do too, but he's never been great at having to carry a match. And in this situation, I think Randy's going to have to carry this match.
Because he's the guy that's been wrestling week in and week out for years.
Do a good job of carrying said match.
That's going to happen at their next pay-per-view Backlash. We also found out that there will be a new challenger to Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship on Raw. It'll be Bobby Lashley. So people in general seem to be pretty happy that Lashley's getting this opportunity. He's being booked as a monster, which maybe is about 2 years too late. But he's been dominating recently, and they've also seemingly gotten him away from Lana with MVP, as you can see in the photo. It seems like that's a pairing that works a lot better. Lashley just doesn't have the personality really to be on his own and be a top guy, I don't think. But him and Lana was just like, that was kind of done out of like absurdity and comedy. So if you're going to put him in something serious, which this is very much a serious storyline if he's challenging for your world title, seems like this works with MVP. So multi-part question. Where do you go in terms of figuring out the managerial aspect, because that still hasn't been resolved? And is this a situation where it's going to be like a one and done for Lashley and he kind of goes back to the middle of the card, or is this really the start of his ascension to main event, potentially world champion caliber?
The managerial thing, I really don't want to touch it. I just kind of want it to stay the way it is with him with MVP and them just, they showed Lana throwing a little fit backstage because he won a match with MVP and hadn't won with like her in forever. And they're not really doing anything to say anything. So I'm
afraid at some point she's going to like get involved with like, I'm going to come out and stand next to MVP and cheer you on, or maybe she'll go on the opposite end and, support his opponents to the point where it just overshadows what he's doing, which they don't need that.
I don't think they need to do anything. I think it's pretty cut and dry that, he ditched Lana for MVP, and now MVP is getting him back to the way he, should be billed as, a dominant figure.
And MVP's done great with that as well, right?
What was that?
MVP seems like he's done great with that kind of channeling.
Yeah, I think so too. I think MVP has done a fine job in his weeks back on Monday Night Raw. So I would like to see them avoid anything with having to overdo this with getting Lana added into it. Just leave it as it is. He left you. He went to MVP, and he's trying to reestablish himself as a dominant force. Now, as per the second question, I think it's too early to tell. I think you kind of have to wait and see what happens with this match against McIntyre at the upcoming show.
I would think McIntyre wins this feud and keeps the title when it's all said and done, right?
Well, yes, absolutely. McIntyre is not going to drop the title anytime soon. I don't see that happening. But the only thing that I can see is this is a one-off if SummerSlam is able to happen in August. Now,
it's happening, but you mean the more conventional...
Yes, the more conventional SummerSlam. If not, then I could see this maybe going this month, next month, maybe into August if they have to move SummerSlam back, because the primary focus is making sure SummerSlam is conventional with fans. So I think it's all going to be dependent on what happens in the coming months, but I can see this going one of both ways. I could see this just being a quick feud for Drew McIntyre, and then maybe they change what they were talking about with Apollo Crews turning, and they have Apollo win the U.S. title, and then have Bobby kind of go for that as a way that, MVP kind of, talked up Apollo Crews.
Right.
But Apollo,
I thought Apollo was going to be the guy that goes with MVP. I would be fine actually with them sort of having their own stable with those two, but obviously someone's going to have to flip, and I think, Apollo Crews going heel would be the direction you'd probably go. But it just seems like so many times when WWE has a guy in this position, they'll use them for what they need and then kind of revert back to not caring as much about that guy. And a lot of people seem to hope that Bobby Lashley's here to stay, because this is, in terms of his mentality and aggressiveness, what he should have been doing since he came back.
Well, this is also a WWE Championship match he should have had multiple months ago when he defeated Roman Reigns. But it never
seems
happened.
like they've missed the boat with him and Lesnar, right?
I think that's gone. I think that unless something happens, in the next year, I think that match that people wanted to see of Lashley and Lesnar is kind of dried up in the well, and
right.
Everybody, if it happens now, it's a little bit too late. Pretty
right.
much, it's kind of like Cena and Taker. Everybody wanted that WrestleMania match for years of John Cena and Undertaker, and when it finally happened, it was kind of like, well, this is about 5 years too late.
Right. So another notable aspect of Monday Night Raw was that Austin Theory got kicked out of one stable, and he was out of that for about 10 minutes before he latched on. So he goes from being with Zelina Vega with Andrade and Angel Garza to now being with Seth Rollins along with Murphy, no longer Buddy. There's been rumors that he was going to go back to NXT, and I was fine with that because I think he's just awesome as a heel if he goes back to NXT because he could say, I wrestled at WrestleMania. I was on Raw. I was with champions. I'm so much better than everyone here at NXT. It's a built-in story, and it's a chance for him to go back, be more prominent in that developmental, if you will, than when he left. And by the time maybe he's 23 or 24, now he comes back to the main roster, he's an instant star. Keeping him on Raw could be a negative, but they've clearly invested in putting him in a pretty high-profile stable with Seth Rollins. So what do you think of Austin Theory, and what ultimately is this going to be a good move, a bad move, or sort of a lateral move for his career?
I actually like the entire play of everything that happened with Theory on Monday night. The way that they just turned on him completely over the accident, and then
he didn't really fit in with that group. And I don't want to, be stereotypical, but the other three are Hispanic. He's not. Well, he was thrown in there at the last minute.
The only thing, and I like the way that Seth comes out with Buddy for this match, and Seth's just kind of staring at Austin Theory the entire time. First of all, did Austin Theory really get beat up that bad that he was still stuck outside by the barricade for like 15 minutes?
No, but do you know what was hilarious? This was almost identical to, do you remember when Buddy Murphy joined Seth Rollins? It was after he got decked by Aleister Black, and he was kind of just laying by the barricade and got involved in Seth's main event match that way. So this was very similar. It's like now that's sort of like a continuation of how Seth got Buddy.
But at the same time, too, like as I liked how everything played out, Austin Theory hasn't grown on me in the past, time that he's been on Monday Night Raw. I think
the talent is immense, and he's the type of guy that Vince can build as a franchise player. But I don't think he's, to the same point, I don't feel like he's a star right now.
I think he's underutilized at this point. I think, he didn't really have a chance to shine right away. Get some good singles matches in, kind of, get everybody, to look at him. Like,
yeah, he was in NXT for like 3 months, really. Yeah. It was very short.
And another guy that, kind of took the same route as Austin Theory is Humberto Carrillo, who, nobody really heard of. And then all of a sudden, this guy's getting drafted on Raw and getting pushed into a United States title picture. He at least had time to build himself and show himself. Now, I would have liked to have seen that more with Theory, but he was kind of, with Angel Garza joining the fold, became the third guy in line, and you only saw him in tag team matches where he gets, 5 to 7 minutes as compared to maybe getting a 10 to 15 minute match to really show off his ability.
Which is what he would have had if he had stayed in NXT.
And now I think with going with Seth, though, the whole thing with Seth is he tag teams with Buddy, but it's not often. Seth's still kind of like the singles guy that has 2 lackeys with him. He's almost like JBL when he had the cabinet. But
will this be Buddy and Austin Theory becoming a tag team, since the Authors of Pain have been disappeared because one of them got hurt and they can't have another member stick around if he's part of a tag team for some reason?
And I hope not. And I hope they give Austin Theory the opportunity to, get some time to shine like Buddy Murphy has in singles competition.
Someone said like they could really see Austin Theory being a protege of Randy Orton. Now, here's the thing. You don't want to just go from one stable to another. That kind of, you only get so many cracks at that. They've already had him now in 2 different ones. But I would sort of agree with that. Like, to me, that probably would work with Randy Orton. It would make people care if it was just Orton and him. When you throw him in with Seth Rollins, Seth Rollins, that's a big star. But Buddy Murphy hasn't really been a big star working with Seth. And now it's like Theory's probably even a little bit below Buddy Murphy, right? Could you see it sort of playing out like that, where he's really not better off on the main roster than as opposed to had he gone back to NXT?
No. It's it's a possibility, but I can't see that being the overall outcome that comes of this whole thing. I think, you need to give things time, and I think they realized that it wasn't working at first, so now they need to switch things up. And I think, like I said, I think this is his time to, really get a little more shine in the singles realm as compared to kind of just being a fourth wheel to the extent.
The other thing I wanted to touch on, Raw, Kevin Owens is back.
Yeah.
It wasn't really hyped that much. It's just like, oh, Kevin Owens is having his show tonight, and then he wrestled a match as a result of it. He actually wrestled against Austin Theory's group. It was actually Garza and Andrade, but Theory was there before he got kicked out of this group. And Apollo Crews made his comeback as well. So kind of two guys coming back together. With all the talent out for various reasons, Kevin Owens, to me, this is a slam dunk that he should be right below Drew McIntyre as the biggest face on Raw. It just doesn't seem like this company consistently does it with him. What do you anticipate from Kevin Owens in the immediate future?
I mean, Kevin Owens, the thing is with him, when he starts to skyrocket, he gets a little injury. But
Which
then
apparently he was injured with like an ankle after his WrestleMania match, and that kept him out about 6 weeks, which not long term, but long enough.
But it's long enough where you're in the middle of a big, picture that has now drastically changed. It's with Kevin Owens too. His best work, in my opinion, as a heel. I think he is better as a heel than he is as a face.
I agree, but we haven't really seen him as a face that long because it always seems like, to your point, something's kind of come up.
So, the only way I would love to see him go back to his heel ways, because I think that matchup with Drew McIntyre would be exceptional. Having the heel of Kevin Owens with the face of Drew McIntyre, because Drew McIntyre is not going back to a heel anytime soon, because from what I've read, they are booking him as, the face of Monday Night Raw now. So,
which is okay, but the problem with what you're suggesting, and I agree, it would be awesome with Owens and McIntyre, but you almost get to the point with Kevin Owens then, like, how many times are you going to switch him and back and forth? Remember, he turned on Kofi in the New Day, but then he became a good guy again and vanquished Shane McMahon. And it's a little bit too much turning if you do all of these in short order, in my opinion.
Kevin Owens, though, has that ability to adapt. And like
I think he can handle it. Right. There's no doubt about that.
And like we were saying, though, he, with, this whole face Kevin Owens thing, it's been, all right, we're going to start this. Okay, nagging injury. All right, we're going to go, you're going to come back. Okay, nagging injury. So we haven't seen to the fullest extent what Kevin Owens can do as a face. So I think with that, it allows the heel turn to be easier because you haven't gotten to see the fullest extent of what he can do as a face just yet, other than, his WrestleMania run leading up with Seth Rollins, which I thought he was did exceptionally well with that lead up. But again, his ability to adapt and his ability to play both roles, I think allows, something to happen. And I wouldn't be surprised if a heel turn comes for Kevin Owens anytime soon, because Kevin Owens has always had that character where he kind of needs to have somebody with him. He needs to have that partner that, on his side. But no one's really aligned themselves with Kevin Owens since he's become a face. And eventually...
Well, it looked like him and Joe were going to do something, and then everything, the floor fell out from Samoa Joe with all of his issues.
Oh, yeah, and Joe's done. That's another story. Joe's stuck at that announce booth for the long haul of his WWE contract until it expires. But I don't know. I, in my honest opinion, I would love to see Kevin Owens go back to the heel ways, and I think that would make for more interesting storylines, because with McIntyre and the way they're going to book McIntyre over the next, probably 6 to 12 months, you're going to need as many challengers as you can get and as many quality opportunities for him to be on the mic alongside someone. And after, Bobby Lashley, who are some main heels that you really see going after the WWE title?
I agree, but I also thought about, like, as a face, who's Kevin Owens going to feud with? I think that until maybe Orton and Edge do their thing, you could have KO against Orton. You could have Orton against Drew McIntyre. But yeah, it's kind of thin on that side. And really, it's thin on all the shows now just because of the circumstances. But I agree, like, there's no natural storylines for either Drew McIntyre or Kevin Owens when you look a couple months down the road, I would say.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I look at it, which is why I think if there's one person to do it with, Kevin Owens is that guy, because Kevin Owens can give you a 3-month program with one person and be able to give you so many different things.
Instead of a 3-month program, how about 3 programs in 1 week? Because that's what Charlotte Flair is doing. And, okay, we understood why they gave her the NXT championship, even if we don't agree with it, because I think you and I had talked about this. I don't want to see her as NXT champion, but they're trying to get the ratings up, trying to make NXT more important. It hasn't worked because the ratings have gone down.
Why they did it. That was the reason in their mind why they did it. That's what they wanted people to think. But really, it was because of Rhea Ripley's issues with her visa. She had to go back to Australia, and with everything going on, they didn't know when she was going to be back. So,
well, she's been back now, and Charlotte's still appearing on the show and still the champion. So for whatever reason, it's stuck, okay? So yeah. Here's what we get. We get Charlotte on Raw, okay. Understood, because she had been on Raw. We get her on NXT pretty much every week because she's the NXT champion. We also got her on SmackDown on Friday, and we'll get her again this Friday because she's going against Bayley. So if you're keeping track at home, she was on SmackDown last Friday, Raw Monday, NXT Wednesday will be on SmackDown again Friday. So that's 4 times in the span of a week.
She was also on NXT the week before that.
Right. That's what I was thinking too. And then Raw.
She faced Io, and then she was on Raw the week before that too. So
with Liv
she's
Morgan.
On a nice, yeah, she's on a nice little 6-show stretch here.
It's too much. And I said this before, like, I'm not a Charlotte Flair fan. I think she's one of the best in company and maybe all of women's wrestling history in the ring. But that doesn't mean that I want to see her all the time. So I just it's making people hate her, but it's obviously not making people hate her whilst tuning in, because the numbers aren't reflecting that she's really helped NXT at all. I believe it was its lowest rating this past Wednesday. Now, again, she wasn't advertised, but I think we could sense that she was going to be involved in the main event, which she came out and she interrupted the main event. So it's going to be probably a triple threat in NXT. I don't know if she's going to continue to work the Raw pay-per-views, if you will, but I wouldn't be surprised if she does. What's your take on all this? Is it hurting her in the long term?
I think it's hurting the entire product. I don't think it's just hurting her, because her segment this past Friday and what she said is exactly true. This is my thought process on this and the way she presented herself. She's 5'10" and blonde. Okay, well, that's your prototype for probably what you want as a champion on the female division. And her last name's Flair. So there's your three reasons as to why Vince wants her on the show all the time. Because he thinks because her last name's Flair and she's an attractive 5'10" blonde female that everybody's going to want to see her. You can only show somebody so much before everything just dries out. Look what happened with Seth Rollins after he beat Brock Lesnar. The lead up to the first 6 months post, Lesnar was great for Seth Rollins. Some of his best babyface work he's ever done.
Right.
But what did they do? They overused him, and the fans got sick of it. And they got tired of seeing Seth all the time. And that's when the fans turned. Now, the issue with WWE is they're not booking Charlotte as a heel, and they're not booking Charlotte as a face, because in the last 2 weeks she took on a heel at NXT in Io Shirai and beat her with a kendo stick, and then she comes back and beats up both Io and Rhea, who are a face and a heel.
Right.
So she has no character, and from what I've seen, they're booking her as a star.
Right.
Now,
she sort of played the face with Bayley and Sasha, but then she plays the heel on Raw. I'm okay with it not being black and white, but to me, like, she's not a person, especially when she's not wrestling. I just don't want to see her.
Yeah,
like, she wrestles great matches, but when she doesn't need to be on interview segments every week. Also,
the only thing she did on SmackDown, which I thought was great, was stirred the pot with Sasha and Bayley.
Right.
To think people guessing. I thought that was great. I thought that was a very actually well done segment. But she didn't need to be there. They don't need to have her coming back again. It's just, you can only handle so much of one person, and it's going to affect her in the long run because people are sick of seeing her, and it's going to affect the company because now when, something needs to be fixed in terms of, ratings or whatever, what you're going to get. You're going to get Charlotte Flair showing up.
Right.
So I think it affects both outcomes, just like, I was watching a different wrestling podcast, and it made total sense to me when it was said, who wants to see Baron Corbin twice a week?
It's funny. I thought of that exact same thing. And here's the thing. Like, back in the day, before there was brand splits, you would see wrestlers every single week on Raw and then on SmackDown. But with the way that the massive roster now, I think, like, the brand split has to be in place because you don't want to see people twice a week. But
yes,
you certainly don't want to see them 3 times a week.
But,
so,
like for instance, with Baron Corbin, who in their right mind, in creative, said, you know what? The first person on that SmackDown roster we have to use this little invitation for is Baron Corbin.
Right. And conversely, Raw is sending Charlotte. So, yeah, it's people that already we're seeing way too much of.
Like Charlotte, you know what? Initially, okay, you can understand Charlotte being the one who gets the brand invitation over to SmackDown. Nobody at all in the WWE universe likes Baron Corbin, except like maybe 3 people.
Not me. I'm not one of those 3.
I don't mind Baron Corbin.
He has a good role, but yeah, it's like I never am like, I'm going to tune in to see Baron Corbin.
He plays a fantastic heel. I think he does. I think he has done an exceptional job, carrying the load as a top heel. But
he's very good at injuring Elias as well.
Oh my God! Nobody wants to see him twice a week. And after this stretch, I could go months without seeing Charlotte Flair and not have a care in the world, because you know exactly what's going to happen. They're going to have a triple threat match between Rhea and Io and Charlotte at the upcoming NXT in Your House pay-per-view, and then she's going to lose the title, and then she's just going to go right back to Raw, and Nia Jax is going to have her one-off program with Asuka, and then we're just going to have a rebuttal of everything that happened at WrestleMania 34 with Asuka and Charlotte.
Yippee. Well, final thing I wanted to touch on here is Drake Maverick and NXT, because this is really interesting in a sense, because we don't know, is Drake Maverick actually signed with the company? There's a lot of speculation that this was sort of a fake out when they did the releases. I don't think so. I think he was legitimately released, but they clearly allowed him an opportunity to continue wrestling and made it into a storyline. Well, there was the chance that he would not make it to the championship finals for this cruiserweight interim title, but with how things played out on Wednesday, he's going to get a triple threat. I would suspect he might win that and go to the championship. Drake Maverick is getting more of a run now than when he was a legitimate employee in this company. It's kind of funny how it works out. He beats Kushida, which it was, I think, kind of obvious that was going to happen because it sets up this 3-way tie, and they are going to settle that with the triple threat. I know you have your thoughts on that, but how this has played out has been interesting. What do you make of all this?
See, again, I'm with you. I honestly do think he's not under contract.
But I do think that there's a chance that they will give him a new one.
I think I think that video that he posted, because you saw a lot of people that did get released that day kind of post some pictures or maybe a short video just saying, thanks and everything. Drake Maverick was actually the one person that day where if you watched his video that he posted on Twitter, you could really see how, upset and hurt and just, how caught off guard Drake Maverick may have been by it. So, I think that really caught the eye of, WWE as to, this guy really is, through thick and thin and everything that he's had to go through, from wedding himself to just being a manager to, everything,
General manager of 205 Live.
He really took this, he really took his job as serious as we want to see people take their job here. So I think, that opened eyes, and I think this stretch is a really good chance. And for Drake Maverick to, get the opportunity to go to the final, I don't think he wins, but I would not be surprised if in that finale of this tournament, Triple H maybe walks out with a contract for Drake Maverick.
It's interesting because I thought all along he's going to make it to the championship and he's going to lose to a heel, because that's how you get a guy as a heel over, by ending this dream of Drake Maverick. But there really hasn't been that many heels in here, and Phantasma is the representative on the other side, and they're portraying him as a face. So it wouldn't work in that sense. So I think what you're saying could be accurate. It's also interesting that they're sort of playing this stuff up with him and Jake Atlas, because they haven't really established Jake Atlas too much, but I wouldn't be shocked if he eventually kind of turns on Drake and becomes a heel as a result of it. So I don't know where it's going, but I think that what they've done, maybe exploitative as it might be, has created some intrigue in this tournament because of the Drake Maverick factor.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, I'm with you on the Atlas thing too. It kind of, just came out of the blue. Like, Atlas just really started to pull for this guy. So now what's going to happen in this triple threat? Is this going to essentially turn into a 2-on-1 against Kushida? And then,
to protect Kushida, they're going to, I was shocked that he lost cleanly in a sense, but I don't think they can have Kushida lose cleanly again. So
no, I think if anything happens, Drake has to pin Atlas.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that happening.
Drake has to pin Atlas, or Atlas has to pin Drake, because Kushida's not going to take back-to-back losses clean. So again, I'm in agreement that that this is a way to help Kushida out, where he doesn't have to take the brunt of the damage. I think, though, by them choosing Kushida to be the one that Drake defeated, I think that really caught the eye of people and went, okay, if they're going to have him come out and beat one of their top guys, this is starting to turn into is this really the end for him after this? Right.
I agree. Anything else from this week that stood out, whether it be Wednesday Night Wars, Monday night, there's the episode finale of Dark Side of the Ring with Owen Hart. There's been a lot of wrestling news, certainly. Anything that caught your eye?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, no.
We've gone through it all then, says one Sean Saputo.
I think everything we've hit in this, podcast has been, the main focal point and the main storylines. One thing I do need to do is you mentioned it, I have to catch up on Dark Side of the Ring.
I kind of binge watched it, where I watched an episode each day starting about 3 weeks ago. So I watched all of season 1, and I watched all of season 2, and then the last 2 weeks I caught the episode. Actually, I forgot to watch it live, but I watched it like the next morning.
Heard it was great though.
It was, I'll tell you, a lot of people said this. It felt like it was almost rushed, like they needed to have the 2 parts to kind of go into this, because they didn't really talk that much about like stuff that people were expecting, which was the decision to go on afterwards. They kind of cut that down to a few minutes. They didn't talk about like the lighter side of Owen Hart, which is, really what stands out when wrestlers talk about him, like how he was a practical joker. And they touched on everything very quickly. Still never really got a resolution as to why exactly it happened, and maybe we never will. But this is something that I think, to me, I was wondering how they would go about it, and it sort of was one-sided because it was his son and his widow's perspective, but they didn't even have Bret Hart on, because I guess most of the Hart family doesn't agree with Martha's approach of like, we don't want him in the Hall of Fame, we hate WWF, all of that. I think a lot of the other family members, and she said this, like, they didn't really agree with her in that sense, but we didn't hear from them on this show. It was all kind of that side of it, which makes it tough, but you can only do so much in what's really about a 45-minute show.
Yeah, but no, it's something I need to certainly catch up on, or all those episodes of Dark Side of the Ring. It's been a doozy the last couple months.
So we said that's about a 45-minute show. We're right around that same time frame. So for us, we're going to call it quits. But Sean, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate getting my first original co-host back in the saddle. That's Sean Saputo. I'm Sean Meyers. If you want to follow us on Twitter, 5-Star Pod, Wrestle, Instagram, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll be back each and every week as long as we are in this world as we know it now, without me working on a regular basis. I got plenty of time to talk about wrestling. Hope you'll come back next week to catch another edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.